Alright, so the next level up, if you're playing the any percent route in the normal order, is 1-5. And 1-5 is an interesting level because most of the level is pretty straightforward. It's a lot of linear rooms with one skip, and then other than that, other than the last room, I suppose, it's mostly just lines. So because it's so much lines, I wanted to focus first on the lines in the level, and then we'll get into the tricks. So this is room one. The position that the green and blue rectangular prisms are at here are roughly where you spawn in. You start as Indy, which is the blue one here. The first thing you want to do is swap to Marion, so the line is relative to the green block here, not the blue one. And our goal is to get up here. This is where the trigger is, up here at the top. But the line we're worried about is to around where this yellow block is over here, because that's where the wheelbarrow is, and we jump off the wheelbarrow to get up here. So the line through this room is pretty easy to see when you're looking at it like this. You basically just take a straight line right there, but notice what that intersects here. So first you're going over this bump here, and then it intersects like the corner of this rectangular indent in the ground that has this gear thing in it. And then from there, it's pretty straightforward. You dodge this lump over here entirely. So the straight line goes roughly like that. Now, if we look in-game, that line looks something like this. And ideally, you're ending the line right around where the top of this wheelbarrow is right here. Now, route 2 is a little bit more complicated. The camera is kind of hooked right around here by this fence, so you're naturally doing close to like a 180-degree rotation of the camera, which makes the line in this room very not straight. So because of that, you're not holding a specific angle on the stick. You kind of need to adjust it and turn it as you go along. So keep that in mind in this room. Again, we start as the blue rectangular prism here, and that is who Marion is when you enter this room. If you are fast and you get a swap off right as you enter the room, you can swap to Indy, which allows Marion to continue walking forward, and then you swap to Marion. So if you do that, you're starting around here as opposed to here. So because of that, the line will end up being slightly different, but the goal of this line is to end up just to the right of this sandbag on the stack of sandbags here. And you make your jump for gate skip along this. This is, of course, assuming that you're doing gate skip. If you're not, we'll cover that later on in the video, but assuming you're doing gate skip, this is what you're aiming at, right around here. So with that being the case, assuming whether you're here or you're here, the line is roughly the same. It's a slightly different angle on it if you're a little further to the left, if you're doing the swap strat right at the beginning. So I'm going to go off of that just because that's the fast strat. Again, this is a pretty straight line when you're looking at it like this, but this is a very not straight line from an input perspective. There's a slight bump you have to jump over here. That lands you on a slight slope at the bottom of this hill, which will push you forward a little bit. Landing on slopes gives you a slight edge boost. It's something you ideally want to do, but that's not a huge deal. And the thing I'm looking for is this bush right here. I'll move a little closer to it. This bush right here is a really good visual indicator of your line. Ideally, you're coming just to the left from this perspective of the bush. In game, it would be a little north of the bush since the camera is like over here at this point. But you want to be a little bit on this side of the bush. Then after the bush, it is a relatively straight line from there as far as the inputs are concerned. You still have to rotate your stick a little bit, but the general visual idea of it is pretty easy from there. You're mostly doing a straight line from here to here. And at that point, you know, what you're aiming for is pretty straightforward. Now, after you get here and you do gate skip, you're gonna land somewhere in this area, around where this post is, and past that, you're heading to this corner behind this gate, which means the line you're looking at will be 2 right about this post. So assuming you're landing somewhere around here, the line to the post takes you right about there, which means you want to jump over the mound here and then just continue in a straight diagonal line over here. That's pretty easy, except sometimes this enemy right here will path up directly in your route, and when that happens, you kind of want to take a wide line around him. If he's right in your line, it's very easy for him to shoot you 3 times, and if that happens more often than not, you're going to end up taking a death, because getting through room 1 without getting shot a single time is actually pretty difficult. But once you get around this corner, you just hug this wall, you'll hit the trigger right about here, and that takes you to the next room. Let's really quick do a visual in-game of that line, just so you see what you're trying to hit here. So you do the double swap, and Marion gets a little bit forward. You can land on this slope here, and that might push you forward. And then this is the bush I'm talking about. So ideally, your line takes you roughly like that or so. You're trying to be about here compared to the bush, heading to the side. Let's do that again, just to, now that we have an in-game look at that. It's a little bit low on my line there, but that is the general idea of the line you want to take there. And now once we're over, land about here, and head that way. Fortunately, the guy didn't get in my way this time, so I can take a pretty good line, but he'd get right about there sometimes, where he is right now, and when he's right there, you kind of have to go left around him, otherwise you're just going to die. So if that happens, take a wide line. If not, take the straight line there. Alright, so now that we know what the lines look like conceptually using Brickbench, let's go ahead and walk through the room in-game to get a couple of more ideas of the gameplay side of what we're trying to do here. So, like I said, right away you're swapping to Marion. As soon as you load into the game, before you can even move, you should be able to get a Y press off. We need to jump over the mound to our right. You don't want to be walking up slopes. That is quite slow. So pretty much right after you switch to Marion and start moving, you can get a jump off and jump up that slope. And do that again to get around the debris and the slight incline there. And another jump immediately after this will get you over that little bump, the second bump in front of me. Alright, so you'll probably get shot like 1 or 2 times in this room, but like I said earlier, the thing we're aiming at here is the wheelbarrow, and ideally we're aiming for the top right corner of the wheelbarrow. The idea with this trick here is you want to be as close to the wall as possible when you jump into it. Marion's jump gains extra height if she's hugging the wall for a lot of time. So you want to be touching the wall basically as soon as you can after you start jumping. That gives you the best chance of getting the most height. You also want to be as close to this corner as possible, because then your starting point has as much height as possible. So something like that should work pretty easily. You'll notice I got up here with ease. Whereas if you instead jump from like all the way down here, it's a lot harder to actually make it all the way up, even if you do it correctly. You can do it, because this is a very lenient trick if you're doing it correctly. But to maximize your chance of getting it easily and quickly, you want to be jumping off this top corner, because the more starting height you have, the less you get slowed down by the slope. You'll notice I'm basically coming off the top of this very quickly, whereas from down here I get slowed down a lot. If I even make it at all, I'm like barely making it like that. Quite a bit slower there than up here. Right, so if you're jumping way early, you're going to notice you miss it by a lot. Like, I'm missing it by so much from all the way out here. And I see a lot of new runners do this quite often, actually. They'll jump way too early and they'll have a lot of problems. You basically want to be already, like, walking off the wheelbarrow before you jump. Like, as late as possible. Think of it like an edge jump, and that'll make it a lot easier to do it. So, edge jump off this top corner. You should be able to get that pretty easily. From here, you want to stay close to this wall on your way up, because you're taking a straight line that goes perpendicular to the transition, which is at the top of the stairs. And again, like before, you want to be jumping up the slope. Ideally, you're buffering inputs there just because you don't want to spend any time on a sloped surface going up, because it's a lot slower to walk up that. If you're, for whatever reason, having a lot of problems with this, again, it's because you're not jumping at the right time. That is the reason, but you can also lag, and I think this maybe is impossible to miss if you lag the game. It's already pretty lenient, but, like, I think this trick is probably impossible to miss with lag. So, if you're still having a lot of issues, that's another option. But I'd recommend trying to get, foundationally good at it, because it isn't that difficult. It's mostly just understanding when you're supposed to jump. And if you can understand when you jump, you should be able to get it pretty easily. Oh, also, I didn't mention this yet, but you want to be buffering a jump. That gives you a little more leeway, and also make sure you're getting off of the edge, or off of the wall, excuse me, as soon as possible, since if you don't do that, you might kind of get caught up on that ledge and lose a little bit of speed. Whereas if you're jumping, buffering a jump, you're going to jump as soon as you hit solid ground, and that will guarantee you're on the wall for the minimum amount of time given for that attempt. So that's pretty much it for this trick. It's not a very complicated one. Again, as long as you understand what you're trying to do, I think it's pretty easy. And I think a lot of people, when they struggle with this, it's because they don't understand the foundational part, which is that you want to be touching the wall as much as possible. You want to jump as late as possible, and that maximizes your chance of getting it. That attempt right there, I had so much height that I didn't even get a jump off with the buffered jump. That's how much height I had. I was like a foot above the top of it. So this is super lenient. And if you're missing it, I just recommend listening to what I said again, watching the inputs on screen. Hopefully that helps, because this is the part of the level that is the most consistent, and you don't want to be losing time here because the rest of the level is a lot harder. Alright, so going into room 2, there are a couple ways to attack this room. The fastest way is using gate skip, and that's what we're going to talk about for the most amount of time here. But gate skip is very difficult. Totally don't think it's unreasonable for newer runners to just choose not to do it. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing. And with that being the case, I will cover how to attack this room if you don't want to do gate skip. So, like we said, with the line, you want to cut right around to over here. Now, this trick is another one that I think a lot of people don't quite understand. So we are trying to get a jump off of this, like, radio station tower thing. I'm not exactly sure what this is supposed to be, but it's a tower, and there is some collision behind it that we can jump off of. And from that jump, we will jump over the invisible wall that's somewhere around here and jump over into the area behind it. Now, the collision here is not very big, and the area surrounding the collision will either get you stuck, slide you off, or slide you on top of this little hut thing. We'll handle a couple of those cases later on, but the main thing you're trying to do is jump right about here. If you see this little gray stud thing behind the dish, think of like an invisible line right around where that is, and you want to be landing on that line. It's not very thick, the space you're aiming for, and so it's kind of difficult to hit, but that's what you're trying to jump off of. Most important thing about this trick is to make sure you're buffering a jump while you're doing it. So after you do your first jump off of the sandbags, just hold down the A in midair. That'll maximize your chance of landing a jump where you're supposed to and actually getting over it. If you're instead trying to spam the A button, not only is that probably going to make it harder for you to hold a consistent angle, but it also adds another variable of, oh, what if you don't press jump at the right time? So definitely make sure you're buffering. It makes this easier, removes an entire variable, way better. Now, if you way over jump, this same collision is also on the other side. It's kind of hard to see, but there's another one of these on the other side. That one has the same property. It's harder to hit, it's slower to hit. You have to jump quite a bit further to actually land on that, but sometimes you can get a jump off of that if you misjudge your line a bit. but between those is sliding space that you'll just get stuck in. If you get stuck in there, you can't really do anything. You have to swap to Indy, wait for Marion to super jump out, and then try it again. If you overshoot, you'll slide off to the left, which will sometimes get you stuck on top of this little cabin thing. Sometimes you'll just slide right off immediately. Sometimes you'll get stuck on there and she'll go back and forth to the left and to the right, and you won't be able to get off of it. We'll cover that later on, but those are the bad cases. The good, best, I should say, missed case is if you miss a little to the right, you'll just slide off immediately down here, and you can just jump back up here and try again. Let's go to the actual attempt. So the main thing I'm trying to do, I'm a little to the right of where I normally am aiming. This sandbag right here, to the left of Marion, from the camera's perspective, this is the one I want to jump off of. It's not the top one, but it's the sandbag right next to it. I'm mostly aiming up left, kind of an angle like this. If you think about where this is, towards the E and Barnett, that's about what my line is like. Because you don't want to aim directly at this. You actually want to aim more to the wall. If you think about it like this, a perfectly spaced jump from here to the pole will completely miss the part that you're trying to hit. So you kind of need to switch your line towards the wall. So you hit the wall and then let the wall push you to the left. And if you do that correctly, you'll kind of be starting your downward arc by the time you hit the line here. And then that buffer jump will kick in and you'll jump. So aim a bit to the right of the pole. Let the wall carry you into the spot that you're trying to hit. Jump from there. So that's a lot of words. Let me actually do it a couple of times. So that's how you do it. And for practice, this isn't something you do in a run, but the easiest way to get back is just to hold down like that. You can get over the wall just by sliding into it. But that's the general idea with input cam. You could see what I had held there to get a better idea of the exact inputs, but you want to jump, like I said, roughly into the wall, and then as you start to come back down from your jump, that's when you actually hit the spot. Now this is a perfect example of the getting stuck on top of the cabin that I was talking about. You'll see if I'm holding down, holding an angle, usually I won't get out. There's a couple of ways to get out of this. One way that I don't have a ton of success with is to time. Naturally, I just get out as I'm explaining it. Alright, so once you're stuck here, apparently eventually you'll just fall off sometimes. But another way of getting off is using lag. So if you time pressing lag to roughly when you're hitting where the gate is, like here, that can sometimes help you get off the wall. But I find this to be relatively inconsistent. It would look like that when it actually works, but I don't find a ton of success with that. I don't usually try and go for it. The other way of getting off is to swap to Indy, come over here, drop in player 2, and she'll usually find her way off pretty quickly. That is the way I'd recommend doing it in runs. But again, this is like the worst case scenario. It's the worst way to fail the trick. So if this is happening, it's a pretty big time loss. But just again, coming over here, keeping her off screen as long as possible while she tries to drop in, that'll guarantee get her off of the wall. Now the other way, the other failure state that we have is this. I talked briefly about this already, but if you get stuck like this, you can't get out on your own. You need to swap to Indy, and then eventually Marion will super jump, you can swap back, and then you can go again. That's a less desirable failure state, but it's better than getting stuck on top of the cabin. So if you're planning on attacking the room completely casually, you want to roughly head like up in this direction. Sometimes there'll be a guy here already. If that happens, that's excellent. You can just immediately get the hat and then come over here. Now, as soon as you start using this, you want to swap off of Marion. Marion will continue opening the door while you can just take a death to reset your hearts. But if you die while on the panel before you're free to move again, then you'll have to get another helmet and you'll have to redo interacting with the panel. That right there, what I just did was probably like the best case scenario of this room. And if it happens like that, you're in a great spot. Because that's all that gate skip skips. It's just that gameplay right there. However, more often the gameplay looks something like this. You come over here, there isn't immediately a guy spawned in, you don't see him. He might not be spawned in at all, and if that happens, you want to kill these two guys, and that should cause him to spawn in somewhere over here. If he does blow himself up, he should still drop his hat, that shouldn't be a problem. But this is what I would say a normal playthrough of this room casually would look like. So, kind of head in this direction up here. If he isn't spawned in immediately, he might take a minute to spawn in. Killing some guys to cycle the spawns is good. Shouldn't take too long. In the first 5 or 6 guys, you should have one with a hat show up. Again, like best case, or first try versus like the worst normal case scenario with the enemies, it's probably about a 20-second time save. It's not a huge deal. It's definitely something that's important at a high level, but especially if you're starting off, if you're losing like 2 minutes to this trick, you probably just shouldn't be doing it. It's not that big of a deal to pass on it. This is not one of the biggest tricks in the game. And compared to how hard it is versus how much it saves, it's probably something worth passing on if you're really, really struggling with it. At least until you practice it some more. So once you've come over here, we've already covered the line that we need to take over here, and that's honestly the main part of this. The trick itself is super easy. You just hug the wall, and that's all you got to do. The trigger is just sticking out there. There's really nothing to that trick. Super duper easy. Normally, while I'm approaching the wall over here, I will start spamming in player 2 and drop in Indy. Ideally, I don't die there, but I'd like to have both players in before I head into the trigger, just because as soon as we start the next room, we want to have both players in. So once you enter this next room, you should have Indy on player 2 and Marion on player 1. Indy basically needs to head immediately to the right, almost straight right. I just hold straight right here. It kind of depends on the camera angle, what direction you're going, but straight right is where you're going to be going for, like, to get to the anvil. And then Marion wants to go into the wall, which is up left. So Indy should be able to whip the anvil from around there, and normally he'll lock on to the boxer his direction, so you kind of will need to move a little bit. You'll probably do a movement like this to get back in position, because you want to be going straight forward roughly at this tree. So you're going to start like this, you need to kind of do a movement like that to get into position. The way this trick works is you want to place the anvil such that the top left corner from this perspective lands right on Marion, and that pushes her straight through the wall. If you're holding straight forward with Indy, you'll get to a consistent position like this. Now the anvil is bouncing around a little bit, so depending on when you drop it, the position of Marion might be a little bit different, but in general, what I do is I line up Marion's leg to be flush with, if you look at the fence behind her, the bottom link of the barbed wire fence has a barb that's like right by her leg right now. Now I'm a bit off of it. Now I'm on it. That's what I aim for. Roughly there. And now if I'm going forward with Indy, that should push me through the wall. And it does. This is not 100% foolproof. Like I said, Indy's animation is oscillates a little bit. So if you place it at the wrong time like that, you won't always clip through. But if pretty much right when you hit the tree, or very soon after it, you place the anvil, that should clip Marion through the wall. Like that. So again, this trick isn't too difficult. It's mainly just understanding what you're trying to do, understanding the setup, and executing. And then once you do that, the trigger is really easy to hit. It's just like up left. It's right there. And then that takes you into the final room of the level. And finally, we have the last room of the level, which at a high level is basically determines your whole split time. So Once you have everything down in this level, the 4 tricks at the beginning, only one of them really causes problems, and that's gate skip. Sometimes you miss gate skip, but it's not uncommon to get everything first try at the high level, and then you just have the last room, which has a lot of micro variants in it. So first things first, you have some downtime while you're here on top of this first truck. If I don't have full health with my players, I like to take deaths with both of them just to give me full health, just so I don't have to worry about dying to something stupid right off the bat. So I just do that right away, and I also make sure to put Sala's shovel away. Now, I like to position Indy, who should be player 2, on the right, and Sala, who should be player 1, on the left. This first truck, all the enemies will be coming out right here. There's only one truck. They can't really go anywhere. So they're going to be coming out around closer to where Sala is right now than where Indy is. And so I want Indy to be attacking to the left, or to the left, and then Sala kind of attacks to the right. There's an important mechanic here that we want to keep track of, and that's the slow animations that happen when you melee characters, specifically with Indy. So Indy has a cycle of 3 punches. The third one kind of has a little bit slower. That first punch is the only one that can give slow animations. So when the enemies first come out, I like to try and preempt it and get a first punch off before that doesn't hit anyone, and then land those last 2 punches on people. Timing for that is a pretty feel-based. You need to kind of get an idea of when they're about to come out, and then land that first punch before it would actually hit anyone. Then with Sala, his attacks are a lot slower, and also they don't always kill, but they don't give slow animations. At least not the kind that locks your character into an animation. Sometimes the death animation will be slow that the enemy has, but Sala himself will not be locked into a slow animation. But because his attacks are slower and they don't always kill, you're going to be doing most of the killing with Indy, which is why it's really important to not land a slow animation on that first hit. So that's a lot of information. This first truck is one of the 2 easiest ones. There's 4 waves of this, I believe. It might be 5. Off the top of my head, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it's 4 waves of this. And right at the beginning, ideally it looks something like that. Now, once you do that, guy is coming out on the right. You want to do the exact same thing, miss with the first punch, and then hit with one of either the second or third punch with Indy. During this time, you want to put Sala's shovel away, because if he has the shovel out, when you jump out of the truck, the first thing he'll do is put it away on the next set of trucks, which is slow. He can't move while he's doing that. To avoid all of that, I like to just have Indy be the one that drives. So my plan is to kill the guy with Indy and then start driving with Indy. There's 2 things you don't want to happen. Thing 1, you don't want to jump into the truck with Sala while he's putting the shovel away. That's soft locks, because the putting the shovel away cancels that animation. And 2, you don't want to be spamming to get in the truck with both players, because that also soft locks. So spamming with one player is fine. I prefer to use Indy because he's already closer to over there. He doesn't have any problem with the shovel animations. I just find that to be more consistent. So that's what I'm going to do here. And then you just need to hold down jump to move. Now that acceleration animation from the truck sometimes takes a little bit of time, especially right at the beginning. That's just RNG. I have no idea what influences that. I just hold down jump, and more often than not, it accelerates quickly. Now once you get over here, Indy jumps out, and you'll immediately jump to the closest truck. Now, you can start moving a little bit before I pause there, so I'm going to be a little bit behind what I normally do, but all of the enemies are jumping to the top truck. So you want to also jump to the top truck with both players to intersect with where they're going to go. And I like to give the same structure to how I attack this. So Indy on the right, Sala on the left. Because they're already spawned in, you'll see I got it there. I got a slow animation on the first one I killed. That just happens sometimes. You can't preempt this one because they're already spawned in. You're far away when they spawn in, so there's not really anything you can do. But once they all die, you want to hightail it over to this other truck the enemy's getting out of right now, and I'm probably going to be too slow in this example, but you want to get over there as fast as possible so you can get that first punch off, and then try and hit him with the second punch. Now, I didn't do that, but I did miss enough punches to where I didn't get the slow animation. Now, this third truck is probably the easiest one. You spawn right next to where the guys spawn, and I just start spamming right away. Usually they all die instantly. Gives me time to set up. That's the easiest set of trucks. Not really much to talk about there. That one is probably the most consistent one. Now, this one is tricky. The first thing you want to do is with both players, as soon as possible, go straight up and jump across, land on the opposing truck. Indy is going to be a little bit closer to the truck to start off of, so you want to jump with him slightly before you jump with Sala, and ideally you're spacing both players' jumps so that you don't land on the bar on the other side. This takes a little bit of practice because all the inputs are going to be out of sync. It's not like pressing jump, jump. You need to do like jump, jump. That isn't the correct timing, but that's the idea of what you're trying to do. You want to get over to that truck as soon as possible, the truck in the back, because if you don't get over there fast enough, one of the guys is going to jump towards the bottom truck. And a lot of people, when they see this happen, they don't know what to do. So I'm going to really highlight this. If there is any enemies that are on any truck except for the back truck, do not chase them. Because if you chase them, they can get stuck. You want to stay on the back truck the entire time. They will come back to you. That is super important. It is very easy to lose a lot of time if you do anything else. You want to stay on that back truck. So now that I've really highlighted that, let's go back into the game. Yeah, so this guy comes right back over. If I chased him, he would not have come right back over. There's 3 waves of enemies on this one. And then once you do that, I drop out immediately because the next level doesn't have any 1P2C at the beginning. In fact, you need to have player 2 dropped out. And I like to do that here because you can't drop out in the hub without losing time. So I find it best to drop out right here while you have a little bit of downtime while the guy is coming out of the truck that has the arc. This guy coming out of the truck sometimes takes a while. I don't think there's anything you can do to speed that up. But after doing that, you need to jump over to that truck. And this truck on the right has a lot of really weird collision. And it's really, and because it's moving around so sporadically, it's really easy to like struggle to jump around. Like the arc itself kind of has weird collision you can kind of get caught up on. Moving around here, it's really easy to mess it up. I mean, you see right now how much I'm moving around. As soon as he gets out of there, it's pretty tough. But ideally, you get over here, you're able to kill him quickly, you don't fall off the truck. And then from there, it's pretty easy. You get in the truck, you press and hold A, and then the level will end. Relatively simple last couple of inputs there. Now, I'll take this moment, because the level's over now, there's nothing more to talk about in the level, but this is a really long cutscene, so I'll just talk over this. This is the last level of Episode 1 we play, because the route ends on 1/6. The reason it ends on 1/6 is because the ending cutscene of 1/6, as well as the finished story cutscene of 1/6, both of them are way longer than the ending cutscene or finished story cutscenes of the other 2 episodes. Because of that, and because breaking up episodes doesn't actually lose that much time in this game, it is way faster to exit Episode 1, go play the rest of the game, and then come back and finish on 1/6, because timing ends when you lose control in the last level you play, meaning those cutscenes at the end don't count towards the final time. The timing on that is 27 seconds, so it saves a ton of time to do that. If for whatever reason you accidentally continue into the level, that loses around 24 or 25 seconds depending on your load. So it still is fast at that point to exit the level immediately once you load into and go play the rest. It saves a couple seconds even if you lose all that time. Just, you know, a thing to keep in mind, especially early on. It's really easy to accidentally continue story. But yeah, definitely do this route. Definitely end on 1/6. It saves so much time. It's just for free. So everyone should do it. There's no reason not to do it. And that's everything we have to talk about 1.5 and this portion of Raiders. We won't be back in Raiders until the end of the game. So after this, the current 90% world record route goes to episode 3. It doesn't actually matter if you do 2 or 3 next. The math of the hub ends up working out to being even, because if you go to the further away one right now, you get a better line later on in the game. So there isn't a timing reason to do one or the other. I like doing episode 3 first because 3-2 is very punishing to make mistakes on, and I'd rather play that 20 minutes earlier than have to play that as the 6th to last level of the game. That's the personal reason why I do 3 first, and since I'm the record holder, that just kind of makes it meta. But if you have issues with episode 2, there isn't a reason to not do it early other than saving 3-2 for later. In the future, the route might change a bit. If it already has changed by the time you're watching this, then disregard this entirely. But that is the reasoning behind the route. Figured I'd mention that here while we're going into the divergence of the episode here. But other than that, that's the end of this level. I thank you for watching. Hopefully this helped you with 1.5, and we'll be on to episode 3 next.